In a recent Channel 4 report, Secunda Kamani got an insight into the mind of one Israeli settler hoping to make a home in post-genocide Gaza. Ariel moved to Israel 7 years ago from Texas.
The idea of you coming from America to here, settling in potentially in Gaza, kicking Palestinians out, a lot of people would see that as settler colonialism.
It's not really colonialism, it's a return. My grandparents were kicked out of Israel by Arabs who were trying to establish a Palestinian state, and they had to leave for their survival, and I'm just coming back and fulfilling their dream. That would be the first thing. The second thing is, I think that, and I know this is a minority view, I think colonialism gets a bad rap. Like, genocide is bad, but colonizing places that are genocidal and they have bad ideology, it's good to come in and correct their views.
What do you think should happen to the people who are already in Gaza?
So I think that there's a couple of possibilities. The one that I think is the most realistic is we got to ask other countries for help. I know that Spain was willing to take a couple of million. I know Russia said they would take a couple of thousand.
To a lot of people, that would sound like you're advocating for ethnic cleansing.
I don't think so, because Palestinian isn't an ethnicity, it's an ideology, and it's an ideology that says that they want Jews dead, and so we want them as far away from Jews as possible.
Wow. She's come over from Texas. She's saying the Palestinians aren't an ethnicity, they're just an ideology. We want them as far away as possible. And I think that really, all of that was shocking. Everything she said was really shocking. But the thing that really stood out was her saying colonialism gets a bad rap. Well, that really reminded me of was Tony Judt. He's a sort of historian of the 20th century. And he said the problem with Israel, or Israel's problem, is that it came too late. It's a project from the 19th century or the 18th century that's attempting to build a state in the 20th century. And Abby, I think that's sort of what really stood out to me there, because what that lady there was saying would have been really normal for, a European in, say, the 19th century or the 18th century who was colonizing North America or Australia or wherever. That would have been completely normal. But the problem for Israel, and why it can't get sort of international support beyond elites in certain countries, is that we've moved on. Right, we don't do that anymore. But she's saying, no, let's bring colonialism back.
The thing that we need to understand about what that woman was saying is that she's not a fringe extremist. She is basically articulating the fundamental ideas that underpin the entire Zionist project. She represents the state of, she represents the state of Israel. She's saying what Netanyahu thinks. She's saying what the majority of elected politicians in Israel think. She's saying it, a little bit more crudely. I think there's at least certain politicians who wouldn't want to say colonialism gets a bad rap. But that's what the project is. It's what made part of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism seem so ludicrous. This definition that was pushed as just the only definition, something we had to accept, something you were anti-Semitic if you didn't accept. Part of that definition was denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, e.g. by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavour, is anti-Semitic. And I think it's one thing to believe that, we have to deal with the situation as it is now. Whatever injustices happened 76 years ago, however many people were forced out, right now we have two populations. And in your opinion, the best option for those populations living in relative peace is a two-state solution. It's quite another thing to say that anyone who disagrees with that, anyone who thinks that actually the historical injustice matters, actually then that needs to be accounted for, actually refugees should be allowed to return, which would end the existence of Israel as a Jewish state, just because there are about 7 million registered Palestinian refugees internationally at the moment. Most of those are in Jordan, some in Lebanon, Syria. I think about 1.3 million people in Gaza are registered as refugees, just under 1 million in the West Bank. If all of those people were allowed to return to within the 1967 borders, so within the official formal borders of the state of Israel, but it's not respected for a long time anyway, then the population would no longer be majority Jewish because there's already 2 million-ish Palestinian citizens of Israel. So it wouldn't be a Jewish state. So the idea that believing that Palestinian refugees and their descendants should have the right to return from where they're forced from is anti-Semitic. It's just not tenable. And actually, the recent ICG opinion on the occupation was really significant in this regard, because the entire court, not just an individual judge, endorsed right of return for all Palestinian refugees, Nakba victims and their descendants to the place they came from. So that is de facto an endorsement of the end of Israel as a Jewish ethno-state. The only possible conclusion to that is a pluralistic, mixed, Jewish and Palestinian state. This is one of the reasons that Israel and Israel advocates really have it in for UNRWA. They attempted to cut off funding. They made some claims about UNRWA employees participating in the incursion on the 7th of October that weren't substantiated. But they see that UN agency as keeping the idea of right to return alive because it registers Palestinian Nakba victims and their descendants as refugees. This is the true face of Israel, and a lot of effort is put into kind of hiding that and confusing people about that. But people need to understand that this is what they're supporting.
Yeah, I want to go to that quote by Tony Judt that I mentioned earlier, because I do come back to it quite a lot. The problem with Israel, in short, is not, as is sometimes suggested, that it is an European enclave in the Arab world, but rather that it arrived too late. It has imported a characteristically late 19th century separatist project into a world that has moved on. A world of individual rights, open frontiers and international law. The very idea of a Jewish state, a state in which Jews and the Jewish religion have exclusive privileges from which non-Jewish citizens are forever excluded, is rooted in another time and place. Israel, in short, is an anachronism. I always think about that when people say, you're treating Israel differently. Yeah, we are treating Israel differently to how the United States was treated the settlers in the United States were treated in the 18th or 17th century. Right? We're not really treating it differently to how we treat other states in the 20th and 21st century. You can't say, we want to follow the rules that we had 300 years ago and sort of expect people to go along with it.